to be okay. So President Biden spoke to the Floyd family yesterday. Let's speak now with Dr. Nicole Gonzalez Van Cleve. She's Associate Professor at Brown University and author of the book Crook County Racism and Injustice in America's Largest Criminal Court. Professor, as you watch what's happening now in Minneapolis, what are your thoughts?
Well, the previous speaker said, you know, we have been here before. And in my hometown, in my the town that I research, it took 50 years to convict one officer of murder. And Lord knows there were so many different deaths and abuse cases from that police department. And so people are hopeful right now. But when people express the idea of trauma, that is being wronged for over generations and never seeing any justice in this court system. And therein lies the tension that every American is feeling right now.
And Professor, how does the pursuit of justice go forward after this trial? There has been so much focus, not just in this country, but right around the world as well, on the case of George Floyd. From the moment we saw the video last May of his dying on the streets of Minneapolis to this moment where the jury is about to read its verdict. But then what happens? Then how does the push for justice find a focus and keep going and find public attention?
Well, just to remind everybody, this trial was not even supposed to happen. The local prosecutor didn't even want to charge Chauvin with this murder. And so it took the protests, the summer protests that you saw here in the United States, to really pressure prosecutors to push this outside to the Attorney General to get this into a court. And so this is really but one verdict, and it is important and symbolic, and it is for the family. But this is not reform. Not one reform has been enacted in the United States to prevent the death that we saw on that video. And therein lies the struggle. This is one verdict, but we're certainly not done changing the system of policing in America.
And Professor, we were hearing from a congressman a little bit earlier about the George Floyd bill, which is before the Senate at the moment, unlikely to be passed because, of course, the Senate is split so narrowly. Does a guilty verdict in this trial, does it increase the pressure on one side of politics to bring about change?
Well, here would be the difficulty. We get a guilty verdict, and there may be many white Americans that feel, well, justice was served, and they kind of put this issue to rest. But I think that would be a huge mistake. We would lose an enormous amount of political will to push more transformative legislation, which is where much of the American public is kind of moving towards. Many white Americans did not realize that the video of George Floyd being killed is the type of policing that many communities of color face every day, even children. And so if we get this verdict, it would be truly tragic to just dismiss this as the issue is over. I think it's going to take further momentum from other jurisdictions, from a political movement, if you will, to continue pressuring the Biden administration to do something different, certainly from the Trump administration, but even from the Obama administration.
I should just say to viewers, we are still waiting for the verdict in this case. We were given an hour's notice. We're well over that hour at the moment, but of course there's so many people to get to the courtroom, the family, the prosecution and the defense teams.
Christian, just briefly, the Washington Post is reporting that we will get the verdict at the top of the hour. Right. So that's in 10 minutes' time, and that's just coming from the Washington Post. A lot of people to get into place, of course, and of course provisions outside the courtroom as well. Professor, the defence, ironically, it was the defence, ironically, that brought this in yesterday about what a reasonable officer would do, and they talked an awful lot about reasonable force. What would a reasonable police officer do in this sort of situation? Why was that relevant to the defence side?
Well, I think the word reasonable, that's a word for interpretation, right? What is reasonable force for a black man like George Floyd? It gets to the heart of very racist assumptions about how policing is different between races, that a type of policing for black men and women is different than how we would police white neighborhoods. This is not happening in white neighborhoods, right? And so, the previous speaker mentioned the Philando Castile case. There they asked the jury, is it reasonable to feel scared when you smell marijuana? And because of that statement, the jury said, well, yes, when we smell marijuana and there is this black man, they found it reasonable to be scared. And so in some ways, there's so much racial meaning and tension within these words. So my hope is that the jury will listen and start to re-question many of these assumptions that Americans been holding for generations. Is that a reasonable use of force? Certainly the people on the scene, even children, a firefighter, found it to be unreasonable. But the defense is forcing the jury to go back to some of those very racist assumptions about how Black people should be policed. My hope is that we're at a place where we can change that.
Okay. Professor, thank you very much for joining the program. Great to have you at this critical moment as we wait for the verdict to be announced.